Les Thomas is a Melbourne-born and based singer and songwriter whose first album, Survivor's Tale, was released in 2013. His latest album, All My Friends Are Superstars, was released this year. His songs are thoughtful, compassionate, and vivid evocations of daily life. So I'm going to talk to him about them and some other things. Hello, Les.
Hi, Sophie. Thanks so much for having me.
It's great to talk to you. And I'm going to launch straight into the album and ask when you started working on it.
So that's an interesting question in and of itself because 10 years might seem like a long time for some people. You know, I feel like I've been constantly doing stuff, uh, releasing singles, writing songs. Um, there have been certain songs, Man on Fire is an example, that were written a fairly long time ago, back in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the ones that I sort of put to one side and said, when I'm ready to do an album, it's going to be part of that. So, keeping the best work for that kind of a collection.
Mm-hmm.
The earliest written song on the album is called Ballarat,
Yeah.
about a real life incident.
Okay.
And yeah, when figuring out what's going to go on an album, basically I like to go over everything I've written
Mm-hmm.
and sort of put it into a coherent collection.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it has been a very, very deliberate process over, quite a few years.
Mm-hmm. So, because you said you used the phrase keeping songs for the collection, which did suggest that there were other songs that weren't destined for the collection. So it sounds like you write pretty constantly. And then when you reach the point of putting an album together, is it that you have a particular intention for that album? That's how you choose the songs, and then some just don't fit that intention? Or is it more just you use your instinct to choose the songs for the album and think, yeah, these are the best representation of me at the moment?
Yeah, I think that a theme, or as in a central theme, will often emerge
Mm-hmm.
in that sort of collection of songs. And um, I'm guided really by the strength of each song. It's how those things might relate to one another. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of themes about definitely um, the main relationships that I have in my life, my relationship to music as
Mm-hmm.
well. I'm known as a pretty political person.
Mm-hmm.
So inevitably there are going to be things that relate to that. But yeah, this is a much more personal album for me than previous work. And basically, I wanted to present a more rounded, collection of songs because I really admire artists who can, um, focus on and show more of the dimensions of who they are, across the emotional spectrum as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Yeah.
We're complex creatures.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think it's very rewarding as a listener to see that and enjoy that.
When you go through the songs you have, though, because you've written them over a period of time, do they kind of feel present again? Like, when you found Ballarat from 2016, and you might have been playing it in shows, but do you connect to the person you were when you wrote that song? So it's almost like not a trip down memory lane. That sounds a bit twee, but just that idea of, oh yeah, I really feel the emotion that I felt, or whatever was in my head when I wrote that song. It's like a way of being there again.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that songs have to earn their place,
Right.
and for a song to write, kind of hang around this long, you want a good reason for it. So yeah, I feel it's got something significant to say. Ballarat particularly, it's about a tragic, loss of young homeless people's lives in a extremely rich country, in a country, in a place that symbolically represents Australian democracy, parliamentary representation. That means representation of the most vulnerable as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I feel like that was a story that deserved to be told. And yeah, I guess Babylon is another one that comes from a very different, more, it's an almost spiritual kind of place.
Mm.
But I like to embrace things that come in a different way.
Mm.
And, I can think to myself, hey, this is a really unusual song for me. So it's like being in the Matrix,
Yeah.
something's different, it's good, and you
Yeah.
go with it.
Yeah, right. And you mentioned being a political person, and you're talking about the subject of Ballarat. So I guess it raises the subject of music as activism, actually. And I always think with art you can hide some things in plain sight. And I also like to talk about subverting from within. So with it, like within the structure of a song, because Ballarat is a song that really gets a grip on a listener, and it might musically and vocally get a grip on them before they actually listen to the lyrics closely, because that's depending on how you listen to songs. So I'm just curious as to whether you've set out to use music as activism in a way, or whether it's just something that's evolved through your writing.
I think I'm a born activist and
Okay.
campaigner, and I can't help myself. And I think there are ways of sharing ideas that can really be a matter of basically offering people a way of showing them a situation. You don't have to tell them a situation and beat them over the head with it,
Mm-hmm.
because when people arrive at their own conclusions, that's so much more powerful than them being dragged by the nose,
Mm-hmm.
And I think, yeah, you want to present it in a similar way to you would a story, a novel. You know, people are intelligent enough to exercise their own minds,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I don't want to be tendentious or directive in how people take it on.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of reveal my feelings later on, but yeah, it's not like I'm in any position to dictate and make people see it all my way.
Mm-hmm. And what you were saying about showing over telling, I think it is one of the hardest disciplines as a writer, though, of anything really, to resist the impulse to tell, and it can take a lot of practice, a lot of skill, and really a lot of ruthlessness with your own work. So is that
Yeah.
something that you've honed over the course of writing songs, or do you think that intention from the start to show as much as you could rather than tell was there in your songs from the beginning?
Well, I've been a lifelong reader and lover of books.
Right.
I have a background in writing, journalism, music writing, political writing, and yeah, I suppose, yeah, I have been educated
Mm-hmm.
in a technical sense around these things, but I also know what I respect and appreciate,
Mm-hmm.
and what works for me. What the people who listen to what you do and support what you do will often have a huge amount in common, is what I find. You know,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think there's a time and place for those sort of very strident kind of anthems, and I've certainly done that. Um, but if you're going to do it, I think you need to do it really well, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And yeah, I think the more you can create a bit of space, I call it leaving the windows open in songwriting for people to bring in their own imagination. I think the better.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it, leaving the windows open. I may or may not steal it in conversation with other people, but
Just give me
clearly,
a credit, that's all.
okay, I will absolutely credit you. And I also, listening to the songs, you clearly have your antennae up in daily life. There are things you document in your songs which indicate that you very much notice details. And I don't know whether it's related to you being, as you said, a born activist, which suggests a certain amount of, or a certain level of compassion, like built-in compassion, where you're looking at the world around all the time and seeing what you can do to improve it, I think, is the basis of activism. So I'm wondering if you were like that as a kid. Were you someone who noticed details, or is it something that, again, has evolved with your writing?
Well, thank you for noticing that, first of all. And I would say, yes, I am very committed to basically taking in, the situation around me. And I feel like my early childhood basically forced me to do that. I remember being very aggressively bullied, basically, because I had a speech impediment. And it's interesting how some people go when they experience that kind of abuse. So, I am extremely sort of empathetic, according to, what my doctors have spoken to me about. I have a vulnerability to other people's pain and suffering. So when other people are hurting, I will hurt too. And I think, as humans, we're social animals. We live with and for one another. And yeah, I want my work to be supportive of people who need it. So yeah, I think it's a matter of you apply, you listen, and you hopefully get across ideas that will resonate with people. And I think it can be, a very rewarding thing when others identify themselves in what you're saying, and feel seen and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, as you said, you can go different ways when you're bullied when you're a child. It can be to become a bully yourself. It can be to think that the world's just terrible and you don't want to have anything to do with other people and become quite reclusive and introverted, or to do what you've done, which is essentially actually put those antennae even further up, I think, which makes you more sensitive and alert. So I'm wondering, therefore, if creating art is a way of actually tempering that to it, because you can really expose yourself and be burnt out in a way. Like there's that idea of being too open-hearted with all the energy flowing out. So I'm wondering if art
I've experienced what they call vicarious trauma through working with refugees and other people who've suffered the worst kinds of persecution. And I think, it's made me think carefully about how do I protect myself. But I also see that in my case, I will always have a level of involvement with the people I love and care about across, different communities. And that means I want to live a purposeful life. And I feel like what I've managed to do so far in my writing, where I've been approached to write songs that are basically giving voice to refugees in detention, or helping to share the story of the first Tasmanian Aboriginal men to be brought across, eventually executed in Victoria. There's a weight of responsibility that comes with that I take really seriously. And I think there is a power in song to communicate. It's very, very hard to argue with a story that's set to a melody and a rhythm. And these things can have a life and, an enduring quality to them. They can communicate. If you think of a song like From Little Things, Big Things Grow, for example, these are setting our history down in ways that just stay in our mind.
And I had a question in mind and it's completely gone out the window. So I will look to the questions that I have prepared earlier, which is, and I'll say that, given the great care that goes into your songs, you obviously want to have musicians playing with you who also take great care with it. And you have some great ones on this album, including Jai Perry Banks. So how do you therefore come to choose who helps you take care of these stories that you're giving to people?
I think we're really, really lucky to have so many talented, amazing people in our music community around the country, really. I met Jai Perrybanks at Tamworth in 2016 and first heard him play up there, and he blew my mind. And yeah, you build these relationships, and when a project comes around, he's like one of the first people that I would call to help out. But I have, so many different musician friends who are super talented, and yeah, I do believe that making a record, it's an art form that you want to honor in full. I'm not, if you commit to making a record, you have to do, I would say, an outstanding job, because why would you start if you didn't have the highest possible aim? And yeah, I'm really, really proud of the quality of musicianship across the album. We've got great guitarists like Megan Bernard, for example, on the track Oil and Water. She plays with Liz Stringer, and she's one of my favorite musicians in Melbourne. Justin Olsen on drums, and of course, Stephen Grady, who did production. He's an incredible musician and vocalist, as well as, an emerging producer, thanks to the work that he's done in this album and more. So I think, yeah, there's a huge amount of talent to draw on. And well, as the title of the album says, all my friends are superstars. They're talented people. They might not have their names up in lights, but I think you want to put together something that really celebrates and honors that talent.
And do you enjoy the recording process?
I love it. Yeah, I would do that every day if I could.
Right.
To do it well, there are definitely costs, but a lot of this album was recorded between Stuart and my home studios. Sorry, Steve and my home studios. So it's a matter of we had sort of $1 million tastes on a beer budget, but we did have great support via crowdfunding as well that enabled us to do some studio tracking with drums and live tracking the title track and so forth, processing sounds to give them that highly, great sounding finish. There's no way you could tell that a lot of it was recorded at home. But then you've got people like Billie Eilish who release, million sellers that have been recorded in the bedroom these days. So yeah, as long as you're intelligent about how you apply these things and have that end result in mind, I think you can do great things.
And it does sound great, the album, I have to say. All the sounds are really clean. They really support, the musicians really support your voice and support the song itself really well. So I'm curious, given that you do other forms of writing and you like to read books as well, that could have been an avenue for you to share stories with the world. What made you decide to become a musician and a songwriter?
I don't really have a choice in that. I feel compelled to write songs. Songs arrive in my head. In the case of an example like Ballarat or Man on Fire, it's like the way I describe it is my brain is like a pinata that gets knocked open from time to time, and these things just kind of pour out. It's not all good. But I think I approach songwriting in such a way where I do write a lot. And the more you write, the better you get, the more conscious you are of the things that do or don't work. So, yeah, it's a matter of I don't wait for inspiration. Sometimes it hits me involuntarily, but writing, I'm a believer in writing every day if you can.
Right. And I suppose therefore a believer that you do have to sometimes just, write some stuff out in order to get to the song that you will end up with. That, some songs are not going to be usable or not going to be as you would want them to be, but that's necessary almost to like clear out the sludge to get something else.
Yeah, definitely. And Like I'm constantly trying to improve my musicianship. I'm known as a lyricist by a lot of people, but you know, pretty much every time I step out of the shower, I have a new melody in my head. So, I might sit down and I'll harmonize some chords out of that melody,
Mm-hmm.
and then suddenly a line will, appear based on that melodic line or hook that will evolve into a song. And yeah, with a little bit of playing around, it's like you can tease out an idea. So there's no end to what you can do. Every day you can actually learn something new, try something new, be inspired by things. And yeah, it's a constantly rewarding and interesting thing for me.
I think that goes back to what I said earlier about your antennae being up. It's not just to the world around you, but also to those ideas that come through. So you are obviously someone who really is in every day. You're very present in every day. If that makes sense.
Um, Not sure that my wife would necessarily agree with that,
She doesn't
but
want to.
you know,
She's not here. She's not in the interview.
songwriters are known for having their heads up their own behinds a bit, but
But it's in the service of art. That's
I
fine.
think, yeah, they talk about the artistic temperament.
Right.
You know, I have that. I can't
Right.
help it.
Right.
I try to function. I try to hold down jobs and relationships. And, the first job is to get away with it, right?
Yeah.
You know, I think it's all a balancing act. And I'm very, very fortunate that there are people who are receptive to my work and appreciate it. And I'm very well supported by my loved ones.
Well, given that as you talked about the artistic temperament, which means you understand other artists, here is my segue to talking about the website Unpaved, which is run by you. You write what's on it, and it's devoted to folk country in Melbourne. When did you start running that?
I think I started it maybe around about 2012 or a bit earlier. I'm struggling to put an actual date on it. So I've been playing gigs in this sort of vein since about 2010.
Right.
And yeah, I didn't feel like this area of music that had, people like Liz Stringer, Van Walker, Geordie Lane, Sal Kimber, those were the people who were around at the very beginning. And I thought, why aren't these people getting the love that they so richly deserve?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I had a bit of experience doing music journalism with a publication called Massive that was put out via the HMV stores. And they used to get me to write regular reviews on, any genre of music.
Right.
They'd send me along to review Ricky Martin or, whoever was playing.
Yeah.
Um, I'd interview international artists back in the days of dial-up phones.
Okay, right.
And it was great fun. And yeah, it really opened up my mind to different kinds of music. I got to cover a lot of good country music as well, which was
Mm-hmm.
great. And yeah, I think the Unpaved project was totally unpaid. And yeah, trying to do grassroots music journalism. And pretty quickly, promoters and publicists picked up on it and started attracting international interviews.
Mm-hmm.
And my thinking at the time is that, covering international touring artists would also help elevate local artists because you've got the same, these people on the same website and so forth. So I got to interview my hero, Steve Earle, twice, and, Jason Isbell and Justin Townsend and Valerie June and David Bromberg and a lot of other incredible musicians and songwriters.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the challenge of rising to the occasion of researching and interviewing and drawing, new ideas out of people whose work I love. So yeah, I did that while it was kind of sustainable to do. And part of that project was also doing a Monday night songwriter session at the old bar,
right,
where we'd have 3 newer singer-songwriters kick off the night with 3 songs each in the round, followed by 3 more established artists doing the same. And that turned into quite an institution for a while in Melbourne. And it was a great way for people to hear new music, make new friendships. And a lot of beautiful things grew out of that, which was wonderful to see.
Yeah. And there is in Melbourne a great music community that's still within the city, it seems. I live in Sydney, and so many of the venues that we had, there's no music anymore, and it's a very expensive city for people to live in. So I think the music communities, particularly in country music, have gone further out, the Central Coast, for example. But it must be great to be a musician working like you are and still be able to be within that community and then also document it. So you have a really interesting perspective on all aspects, I think.
Yeah, I love Melbourne so much, because it is so rich in culture. The people make it a special place, the venues. Yeah, we're extremely fortunate as well to have incredible community radio. If you look at stations like Triple R, PBS, 3CR, Joy, they all give an amazing platform to local artists in a way that a lot of other cities just don't have. So we're very, very fortunate. And yeah, I do not take that for granted at all. I think, yeah, we want to basically get out and support every gig that we can.
I guess, partly it's a continuum, I guess, of the artists get out and play and deliver for the community, and then the community supports them. And it just so happens that in Melbourne, that's a symbiotic relationship that still seems to be quite healthy.
Yeah, definitely. It's taken a pounding with COVID, that's for sure. And I think, people's habits can change, people getting used to staying home and watching Netflix and that kind of deal. But whenever people go out, they have a wonderful time. You can't replace that real life experience. There's a buzz about being in a room with live music wherever you go.
Yeah.
And yeah, the crowds may not be huge for every gig, but they're really appreciative and they get right into it, and they're glad that they came.
Do you remember the first ever gig you went to as punter?
I remember being very, very young back in 1988 during the bicentennial celebrations, and Uncanny X-Men were playing on one of the piers down in St Kilda.
Yeah.
And thought, oh, so this is what a rock concert is.
It's rock and roll.
Exactly.
And what was the first gig you ever played?
I would have been 13 years old, playing drums in my band called the Lobotomy Scars at the Riverside Tavern in Richmond. Because, yeah, we were young punk rockers.
How does a 13-year-old come up with a band name like that?
Hey, I'm weird. What can I say?
Well, it's very specific, and as I like to say, the specific is universal. So, Les, as I'm talking to you, you are on the road on a tour. How have you found it being out connecting to people? Because as you said, post-lockdown, things have changed. People have changed their habits, but I imagine people have been coming out for your shows.
Yeah, every show's been fantastic. They're all different, and there's a novelty to being on the road and in a different venue that you've never been to before. So yeah, started off in Canberra in the first night with a wonderful young Ngunnawal artist by the name of Linda Barlow. And yeah, it was just so beautiful to be at Smith's Alternative. We had a small crowd, but they were a quality crowd, and they got so into it with, singing, clapping, you know, busting moves and that kind of thing.
Mm.
I believe that, you know, uh, yeah, when you're at a gig, everybody's involved, right? So
Yeah.
we had a great time, and every gig that we've played, I've played a number of gigs now with Bradley Christmas, which have been awesome. He's an incredible musician and songwriter himself. I've been accompanying him with some harmonica. He's been accompanying me with some piano.
Mm-hmm.
And every gig, we've had these incredible conversations afterwards with, yeah, people who are so happy to see us
Mm-hmm.
and love our music and want to support what we're doing. So, yeah, the shows haven't been big, but they've been really, really big in heart and rewarding. And yeah, we've been loving every minute of it. So yeah,
Fantastic.
great
Well,
times on the road.
it's live music is the best, you know. That's part
Yeah,
of why I do what I do, to try to encourage people to get out and see wonderful musicians like you. And I've had you talking for quite a while. You need to save your voice. You have more shows. Les Thomas, it's been great to talk to you.
thanks so much, Sophie. I hope to see you at a show soon.